Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sharpham What Goes Together, Grows Together, What Grows Together, Goes Together even. Myself and Tom will be speaking to you shortly. Tom, are you muted there? Great. Okay. Cool. Okay, we'll just let some more people enter, and then we will start. Just bear with us a few moments. Welcome, Tracy. Charles, Edward, very welcome. Okay, let's wait for Elizabeth to join us. Check the time. I think we're on 8:30, so we'll keep an eye out for anybody else joining us. But good evening, and as I said just a few moments ago, welcome to the Sharpham Cheese and Wine presentation on what grows together, goes together. So we're going to get going. We might let a few people in as we go along, but I'm just going to start off with by saying thanks to Tracy and Patrick and everyone out there for giving us a slot this evening. Conscious we've got half an hour, and following us is either looking at the future of the artisan cheese world or line of duty. So I've got a feeling we better be bang on time. Just to confirm that we are live, just that you can see by my rosy face that I've been in the lovely sunshine today, and it's been very lovely and warm in Devon, so I've been enjoying lots of that. So welcome to James, Faye, Emily, come on board. So just by way of introduction, I thought I might just share with you a little bit of history and just a bit about how we got to where we are today at Sharpham. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Hopefully the technology will work, and I'm going to still keep an eye on other people who are still joining us. Okay, so if I just click on multitasking. So just for a bit of geography, we're based down in South Devon. I'm sure most of you know where Devon is. We're in this little hook here, or more specifically, where the big red dot is, and we sit beautifully overlooking the River Dart. Goodness me, I'm just trying to admit also, as I say, excuse me for multitasking. This is our beautiful little corner of the world, called Sharpham, because in the Saxon times, a pointy bit that poked out into a river was called a ham, and this was quite a sharp ham. So that's why it's called Sharpham. This is where the dairy is in here, and the winery here, and then this is Sharpham House here. These guys, hi Alexander and Dan, you're welcome. Okay, so the house itself has a long history, which I won't take you through, but basically the sort of more recent history is Morris and Ruth Ash, pictured here, bought the house in 1962. They have been very active in the area, philanthropists, investing very much in environmental and proper food production. So they bought the house and set up home. They had a herd of Jersey cows that they brought with them. Whilst initially they were selling their milk to the local co-op, Morris decided that that wasn't offering enough of a return, really, in fact, barely a return at all. So he decided to instigate some cheese making initially in the kitchen of the house, but then evolved into the courtyard where they set up a small dairy. They started making what was Morris's favourite cheese, or tried to start making Morris's favourite cheese, which was a brie. Morris recruited a cheesemaker called Lisa, and she went off to France, to Normandy, to learn how to make brie-style cheeses, particularly using high-fat milk, such as what would come with a Jersey cow. Some people said to Morris that he'll never make a decent brie with Jersey milk, but he was determined to prove them wrong. Isa came back and initially made sort of more of a fresher Colombia-style cheese, but then progressed to making the brie-style cheese that we make today. So Morris and Ruth started the Sharpham Trust and donated the estate to the trust in the early 1980s. And cheese making really started well in 1981. So we're celebrating the 40th year this year. But stories then picked up, as you can just about see here, by Mark Sharman in the background and Demi Mumford. Mark had come back to the family, who's related to the Ashes, had come back to the family from a career in Canada engineering. Got involved initially in the cider orchards, then in the winery, in the vineyard, and then gradually became more and more involved in the cheese making. Met his partner Debbie, and Debbie was also helping out in the winery and in the other nearby dairy at Sycamore, working with Robin Condon. But he managed to sort of get her to start initially helping out down at Sharpham, and then one thing led to another, and Debbie took over as head cheesemaker. And they progressed to developing the cheese business successfully, mainly in the West Country, but then further afield with some really good customers in London. And I sort of came on board and started working with them in 2018, following sort of Mark's and Debbie's sort of aspiration to do a little bit less, having worked really hard for lots of years, and then gradually sort of relinquish themselves and exit the business. So today, it's still a family business. This is my family very much involved now. So my youngest daughter we dragged down to do some work there. That's Annie. My second youngest daughter Molly came in and helped us out, especially during lockdown when many of the staff were furloughed, but we had to keep looking after the cheese. My wife's more increasingly involved in the business, and there's Dan in the background there yesterday down doing some photography. So it's still very much a family business. Sammy's not pictured there, but she's involved as well. And even Ron the dog now is down guarding Sharpham when nobody's there. Well, he's not really a guard dog, so actually that's pointless. So just onto the dairy itself. So this is the dairy that was built just nearly 20 years ago. It's just over 3,000 square feet. Milk comes into this end, and we've got 2 bulk tanks. We can hold a capacity of around sort of 4,000 litres, but that gives the ability to have 2 different types of milk at one time being stored. We use Sue, our truck, to go and collect the milk, and then we have a couple of goat's milk suppliers that actually will come and deliver milk to us as well. So milk in this end, we do pasteurize goat's milk and our sheep's milk, but we only thermize our cow's milk from our cows, because we believe that gives us a better product to work with when we're making our brie and our cow's milk cheeses. Leaving some of that sort of some of those volatiles in the milk helps us to do so. So in the dairy, this is our biggest vat. We have half a dozen vats. This is 1,000 litres. We're generally making, well, we only make on the Monday to Friday, starting, as most people in the cheesemaking world will know, quite early in the morning. Cheesemakers are in by 5:45, and then we'll finish the day generally sort of between sort of 3 o'clock and probably 3:30. So milk through into production, made in vats, separating curds and whey, as people know about the cheese making process. And by the end of day one, we'd have molded all of the cheese, set it to one last turn before leaving it overnight. We'll come in the morning and then take it into the brining room, run it through the brining tanks. We have a little bit of salt during make, but mainly the salt comes from the brining tanks. And then the cheese will be put into one of the ripening rooms. We've got 2 ripening rooms, one for soft cheese is here, and then we have our ripening room for semi-hard cheeses as well. Our milk comes from our herd of Jersey cows, which are looked after by Johnny and Marina Watton and family, just out in East Prawle, a few miles away from us. They do a great job at looking after not just our cows, but they also supply some of our goats milk and look after some of our goats as well. This little lady in the middle here is Dorothy. So my daughter Annie has sort of adopted Dorothy. She was born just before Christmas. And the idea is she sort of shares through sort of social media sort of how Dorothy is growing up and how she'll go on to give milk and live a lovely, happy life down in East Prawle. As I say, Johnny also looks after some of our goats and a lot more of his goats. And obviously, they're quite characteristic. These photos were taken from earlier in the week. They're just having a new house built. And whilst there's some bars in the front there, they don't really adhere to the bars. They're often roaming around all over the farm. The cows themselves now are out on the grass. They go out as early as possible. They come in as late as possible. And really, you know, they choose. So, you know, cows don't want to be out when it's cold, wet, and having their feet slogged in mud. So That's the girls. We also take used milk from just down the road, just near Ivy Bridge. These guys, James and Jade Watton, started up only a few weeks ago, actually, and with the help of Tom Garden and Helen Feed, they're now sort of producing and supplying milk regularly to us, or we collect it from them. And they also produced a little baby, Adele, who was born just about the same time as they started milking sheep. So very busy people. So that's our range of cheese, and we're going to talk a bit more about the cheeses that some of you have got in front of you this evening. But I'll just probably pass on to Tom now to give you a bit of background on the wine. Oh, I might have to ask you to unmute, Tom. I'll just stop sharing a minute, and then I think I can get you to unmute. It's just so we don't get.
There we go. You can hear me?
We can. Brilliant.
Perfect. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tom. I work over the winery side at Sharpham. And yeah, I think just a real sort of quick fire bit of background information about what we do on the wine side of the business down at Sharpham. The vineyard, as you saw in that lovely aerial shot, is perfectly situated on the banks of the River Dart. Viticulture, that is growing grapes in England, is not an easy task, so we need all the help we can get, and certainly the Dart Valley provides us with a very unique little microclimate. The river at that point is salt water, which helps to moderate our air temperature, and we're quite close to the sea as well. This has actually been really beneficial in the last couple of weeks. We've obviously had quite a few cold snaps, so that nice warming temperature of the river has really helped us. We've got a perfect south-facing vineyard, so it laps up all the sun all day long, and we have a really steep slope in parts as well, which is really important for drainage, because being in Devon, we do get a little bit more rain. Someone's just asked if they can start their wine. I would say 100%, definitely. The Sharpham site,
and start on the cheeses as well. Sorry, we should have said that at the top, at the start. We always carry on and eat and drink. Sorry, Tom.
That's all right. So the Sharpham site is just under 10 acres in size, first planted in 86 and extended in 1993. We also have another vineyard just downriver, a site called Sandridge Barton, which is the larger of the two vineyards, planted in 2008, and that is 24 acres. And actually, currently, we're in the process of moving our whole operation down to Sandridge Barton. We've actually kind of outgrown our little winery space at Sharpham a little bit, so we're going to be moving downriver, but certainly producing wines and linking in with the dairy, as we always have been, carrying on that tradition that Maurice Ash started. Way back in the 60s, when he brought the cows over and then eventually planted the vines. So I'll hand it back over to Greg to introduce the cheeses, and then what I'll do is I'll talk to you a little bit more about the wine that we're going to taste just after that as well, and then we can try some pairings out.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to this because, okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. So yes, so we got a few cheeses that we're going to try with this evening. I suppose they're the traditional cheeses that were made at Sharpham that we have grown to know and love. We'll start, I think, with the Sharpham Brie, which, as I said, was the first cheese that was made by Maurice and Issa way back when. It hasn't changed very much over time. The recipe is still from the milk from the Jersey herds, which gives us this lovely golden color. For those of you who've got the cheese in front of you, I'm a little bit embarrassed here because I grabbed my cheese quite late. It's been quite a busy week at Sharpham, so I've grabbed some cheese that's a little bit underripe. You can see that the middle of my cheese is quite chalky, and although I've got some protein sort of giving way underneath the rind, it's not quite where I would prefer my brie to be. But as I said earlier, the milk comes from our own cows. The culture we use with all of our cheeses is Penicillium candidum, which gives a lovely white rind around the cheese. As I showed in the dairy earlier, the key things to get the quality of product that we're trying to sort of sell into the market is by the hand making and nurturing of it, and the skills of the cheese making team, really. So what we're looking for with the cheese itself is that lovely golden color. With the Jersey milk, it does vary throughout the year. Coming into springtime, we do get a little bit more color that comes as soon as the cows go out onto the grass. But what we should get, and if for those of you that got the chance to try it, is a deliciously rich and creamy cheese. I'm just going to take a little bite there. You can taste some of the grassy notes coming through on the cheese. extremely indulgent. And then what we're hoping for is that we just get from the rind, we just get a little bit of those chicory notes, which just gives it a nice balanced sort of flavour. As I say, mine is quite young, so I'm not getting any sort of real clear mushroomy notes coming through, but that will happen over time. The cheese itself, generally, it's ready to. So I've just got some more people coming in the waiting room. Let them in. Yeah, so the cheese will be ready to go to market, to wholesale market, sort of 3 to 4 weeks. But really, for consumption, the ideal window is sort of between 6 and any time up to really sort of 10, 11, even 12 weeks, depending on how you like your brie or your soft cheeses. I think there's sort of perhaps some education that we soft cheese makers need to share with consumers more about, you know, picking when they like their brie and then helping them to find, you know, what their favorite flavor profile is. So that's the Sharpham Brie. I think, you know, given time constraints, we'll move on to next cheese to taste, which is the Sharpham Rustic, which again was one of the first cheeses made at Sharpham. It again has the lovely golden color that you'll get from the Jersey milk. The Sharpham Rustic is made in a particular type of mold that looks very much like a colander because it's a colander, which gives it its lovely bulbous shape. And really the sort of trick to making sure that the rustic stays in its best possible quality is the nurturing through the make process. So, you know, after being molded on day one, it is about making sure that you're turning it and culturing the mold over that time. Again, we use penicillium candidum. And again, with the Sharpham Rustic, what we're really looking for is a really clean, quite a fresh flavored cheese. Again, complemented by the rind. Delicious to eat on its own, but what I should have said is we've got some lovely accompaniments this evening as well, from Trucklements and from Peter's Yard. I think the best crackers out there. And what I did try this with earlier that worked particularly well, for those of you who've got it, is just a bit of rustic with a bit of the quince jelly from Trucklements, which worked really well. For those of you who haven't got cheese and biscuits and crackers, I apologise, but this is really nice. Perhaps pass on to you, Tom, there, to have a chat about the wines.
Yes, definitely. So Sharpham, we produce many styles, but there's a couple in particular that we kind of really feel that work the best with the cheeses. And naturally, you know, kind of linking into Greg's title of this tasting this evening, what grows together goes together. The original variety planted at Sharpham was Madeleine Angevine, which is actually a French variety. It has a bit of history in the Loire Valley, although not prolific. I had a great question from James Grant, who asked if we benefit from the reflection of the sunlight off the river. And basically that really helps certainly ripening the Madeleine, which Madeleine is on one of the steeper sections of the vineyard. So the sun bounces back off the river onto this part of the vineyard, and it helps to achieve the levels of ripeness that we need. And Madeleine Angevine for me is kind of a Loire-esque style as well. It produces fairly quite sort of delicate, quite soft white wines that can be a little bit floral and quite citrusy. And actually we make Madeleine in a few different styles. Tonight we are tasting the Dart Valley Reserve, which is one of the original wines that was ever produced at Sharpham. This one is from 2018, which was actually a real great harvest if people can potentially cast their minds back to the summer of 2018. It was also the World Cup summer. We had really hot temperatures, hardly any rain, which meant actually we had really high yields and some of the best quality fruit we've ever had in. And we've actually had a really good run. 2019 was very good and 2020 was also pretty outstanding. And what that does in the vineyard and what it does to Madeleine, for example, is it's just going to bring those fruit characters out a little bit more. It's going to increase the sugar levels, and actually it's going to make our wines taste, make the English wines a little bit more Mediterranean in style perhaps. And the Dart Valley Reserve, this is produced with about 90% Madeleine Angevine. There's a touch of another great variety in there called Bacchus as well. We only use the pressed juice for this wine, and we take the first third of the juice, the free run juice, which we naturally naturally run freely, I suppose. That goes to produce another slightly more delicate wine. But here, the pressed juice usually gives you a slightly riper fruit character. We ferment in stainless steel. We do not, at this point, we want a nice cool fermentation. The cooler the ferment, the slower it ticks over, and we can kind of bring out these more sort of delicate flavors and aromas. After fermentation has finished, we take around about 10% of the wine away from what will be the overall blend. We age it in some French oak barrels for just a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, just to give a little bit more body and sometimes a little touch of spice before blending it back in. We put the wine for a gentle filter, and then we bottle. And 2018, like I said, was a generous harvest. We are actually coming to the end of this wine now, but still really drinking in its prime. And for those who have the wine with us, it has a kind of beautiful golden color to it, incredibly ripe on the nose. It almost has this kind of pear drop, sort of white peach character to it, maybe with some apple blossom as well. And then for me, I just pick up this real tiny little hint of it's almost like baking spice a little bit, and that's what it gets from the oak barrel. Hopefully when you taste it, for those who have it, the wine is incredibly balanced. Like I said, 2018 was a real dream harvest for us, and sugar levels were high. The fruit was just so easy. It's kind of what we always want to work with in the winery, and pairs perfectly with the cheeses. White wine can be incredible to pair with cheese, and that high fat Jersey milk sometimes needs that nice little streak of acidity that Madeleine Angevine has just to cut through it. It really brings out some of those grassy herbaceous notes, I think, certainly in the Brie. And in the rustic, I think Madeleine has a bit of a citrusy acidity, and the rustic for me has a slight citrusy sort of tang to it at the end, and I think that really sort of complements each other quite nicely as well. So hopefully those who've got the wine and the cheese in front of them are appreciating the pairing that Greg and I rather fortunately get to taste pretty much every week.
I was going to say, I mean, we do a lot of testing to make sure we get this right. But I mean, again, the subject of the title of this presentation is about what grows together goes together. And I think that works in a number of ways. I mean, firstly, as we touched on, the businesses have grown together, and they go together. We work really tightly with these guys. And, I know some of the other presentations, I watched a lot of it last night. I talked about, some of the challenges the industry's had over the last 12 months. And really, I think we have done great things, not just with each other, but working with some nearby cheesemakers and other artisan producers to really try and keep our heads above water. And it seems to, well, we're still here. So I think that's fantastic. But also then you've got the fact that we are always tasting these things together, and that gives you the opportunity to make minor adjustments and see what really does work. And then obviously, we do share the same land, in Devon, particularly the South Devon is famed for its mineral rich soils, red in color that comes from the sandstone, really rich, great agricultural land, and naturally that's going to come through with the cows grazing on the grass and with what that being the roots where the vines are rooted. So there is going to be that complementary part to it. So I'm just going to move on to our final. Well, sorry, I've just got a question in the chat. When did the tasting with Greg? Oh, we did. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, thanks. Hi, James. James is saying it's a compliment. James Grant's saying a compliment there. I've got to compliment him for his session last night where he was trying to. Well, he did successfully make cheese and put it on a pizza within half an hour. Amazing. Well done. So just to move on to the final cheese we're tasting this evening. So we've got Sycamore, which is probably one of our, well, along with the Brie, it's our biggest selling cheese, but also one of our more famous cheeses, named after Sycamore Street in Totnes, which is where the cheese shop was set up to sell the cheeses that were being made on the Sharpham Estate. This cheese actually was originally made by Robin Condon, who is a legend in the sort of cheese revival times during the 1970s. And originally made in his dairy, but as I said earlier, Debbie Mumford moved down to the Sharpham Dairy, and initially it was made there as a sort of favour for Sycamore Dairy, and then over time it became impossible to mix the white cheese with the blue cheese for obvious reasons, and so Sharpham took it on as their own cheese to sell many years ago. But what we got here is the stark white cheese that you get from the goat's milk. As I say, what's key here is high quality fresh goat's milk to start with, which we get from some of our own goats and some other local suppliers as well. And with Ticklemore, again, the trick is that it's not, if we get any hint, and I taste every drop of milk that comes into Sharpham, if we get any hint of those really, really sharp, aged, acrid notes, then we're not going to make cheese with it, or certainly not going to make Ticklemore with it. It needs to be fresh, it needs to be clean, and that's what comes through in the cheese. So just have a taste of those if you've got some. And hopefully you're really getting that sort of freshness, that slightly herbaceousness. You know, and with age, you'll get some other flavors coming through, a little bit more savory notes, a little bit perhaps of, again, of the chicoryness that comes through a little bit, but nothing you're not going to get like some of those French cheeses that I enjoy that really are sort of kicking with acrid notes. But Ticklemore is fantastic cheese as part of a cheese board, looks great, acts well, but also fantastic to cook with. And we know that some of our customers, you know, you have a strong market for the cheese being crumbled into salads, or actually melts really well with things as well. So so that's Ticklemore, one of our favourites, and actually really pairs really well with the Dark Valley Reserve as well. I'm just conscious of time. Just take a quick time check. So if we just still got people joining us, which is either I've got the time wrong or they have, but you're very welcome still anyway. So just have a look at the chat, see if we've got any more questions coming through, which I think we've sort of covered those for a minute. So what I was just going to do, Tom, perhaps is touch on, you know, you mentioned some of the future developments and how Sharpham Wines growing. I've just got a couple of pictures here that you might want to sort of just introduce that talks about some of the things that are going on next. So I'll just, if I click on that one. Oh, that's not us. Oh, that was supposed to be there actually. So yeah, just to let everybody know that we are, because you saw from the picture, we are very open. There is a cafe on site that's run by Dan, and Tom runs some brilliant vineyard tours, wine and cheese tastings outside all our frescoes. So we are open for business now. So please come and see us and come and say hello. And you can see the cheese making through the windows as you saw earlier. And we're delighted to welcome the visitors. Tom, we've got a question there saying, what's the sparkling wine like? I guess you're not going to say rubbish, are you?
It's amazing. We've won a couple of international awards for our sparkling wine. So yeah, we're slightly different because of the soil and the geology than to the more famous ones in the southeast, but certainly worth a try if you like a glass of bubbles.
So just before going on to those pictures of the new venue that I'll come to, or the new winery, I was just going to point out that there's a couple more events coming up that we're helping out with and getting involved in as well. So next weekend, weekend after, sorry, the Virtual Cheese Awards, and we're involved in a couple of events locally this year. But there you go. Tom, do you want to sort of just explain what's going on there?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we've kind of outgrown our winery space and we can't do any more development on the Sharpham site. So we've actually made the decision, quite a tricky decision, to move downriver to our larger sites where we're currently developing all the visit facilities that we're aiming to open in spring 2022. That is the larger of our two vineyards and has been supplying most of our fruit for the last few years. And here is a before and after shot of our brand new state-of-the-art carbon neutral winery. The shot on the left was in August 2019 and it was completed in August 2020, about a week and a half before the fruit from 2020 started coming in, although there are a few builders still running around doing a little bit of snagging whilst we were getting the first load of the Madeleine in. So yeah, we're halfway there, but it would be an amazing place to welcome everyone to and show off our new home. But of course, we're still at Sharpham this year, and we really want everybody to come and visit us at the amazing Sharpham site as well and experience what we have to offer.
So yeah, so we're used to having more time. We feel a bit rushed today, but one of the things that for us over the last year has been really nice to get involved in is we've had lots of both companies and individuals come to us and say, would we host some wine and cheese events talking specifically about the products that come from Sharpham. And we hosted one last Thursday from the winery and managed to do a virtual tour and got deeply involved in a load of wines and cheeses and neighbouring cheeses and wines and beers as well, which works really well. So, you know, I would say that obviously we've got some big cheese and wine fans on here, but do keep an eye on the website, www.sharphamcheese.co.uk for future events. We've sort of paused them for now until the autumn because we're going to be busy at Sharpham during the summer. both making cheese and also entertaining visitors. We will be doing some more of these events. I mean, I suppose just by way of sort of wrapping up, I'd like to personally thank everybody who puts in so much effort for this big weekender, because it is brilliant. Last year, it really was a shining light at a time that was pretty dim. And I think that it's got far more consumers talking about artisan cheeses and artisan products in general than ever would be if events like this didn't happen. So as I said earlier, I know Patrick came on late, but hats off to him, Tracy, and all of the team, people like James that get really involved for putting these events on. And thanks to everybody for supporting these events, because, you know, they wouldn't be worth doing without this. And thanks to Dan in particular, who came onto the call at about 25 past, onto this event at 25 past, and was my one, I thought it was going to be my one person watching this evening. But I'm relieved that we've got a few more people on now. And we have actually recorded the event as well. So if people did want to see it or want to review it again for some peculiar reason, then you will be able to go back over. But for now, thanks very much for watching. That's a really quick introduction to Sharpham Dairy, and I'll let Tom say goodbye himself. And please come and see us and keep in touch. Tom, over to you.
Yeah, of course. You know, thanks for everyone for tuning in and hearing about, you know, our little spot in South Devon. We hope everyone has enjoyed the chat. And of course, if you haven't ever tasted the wines and cheeses, then we really encourage you to do so, because we can speak from a lot of experience. They taste fantastic.
And what we do, a tradition on our events, is rather than these embarrassing sort of situations where you hang up, we hang up, is we just simply count down from 5, and on 5, I'm going to close the event. So 5, 4, 3, thanks very much. 2, 1, keep eating cheese. Thank you.
Good night.